Hi. I just ran off because I remember I had my AC on. I'm like, it gets really loud in here when I have the AC on, so I just turned the AC off. Hi, everybody. Hi. Welcome to Geek Speaks Greek. I am your geek, George O'Connor. Speaking to you in English, but the Greek I'm speaking about is each episode of Geek Speaks Greek. I talk about a different personage from Greek mythology, be they goddess, god, hero, or monster. Today we're going to do none other than the famous Helen. I want to say, she's often called Helen of Troy, but that's really only for like 10 years of her life. Sometimes she's called Helen of Sparta. She was born there, so that's okay. I'm just going to try calling her Helen because, it's a pretty common name nowadays, I guess, but I don't want to identify her despite where she lives. That's like calling me George of Brooklyn, which actually sounds pretty cool. So, one of those mornings where everything got away from me, I was just, let me fix this view a little bit. Okay. I was literally just eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich 2 seconds ago, so let me just take a sip of water because my mouth is kind of peanut buttery. True fact, I always brush my teeth right before doing one of these, which is funny. I'm a little worried about that sort of stuff, so anytime I'm going to have any social interaction, even if I'm talking on a phone to people, I like to brush my teeth. So today I didn't, so inwardly I'm dying. Hi. Well, there was a book falling on the floor. Let's start off this episode of Geek Speaks Greek the way we normally do, where I start off sharing some of the artwork that you, my talented and faithful fans, have sent me in. And I love this so much. First thing, I didn't get permission to share this one. Hold on. There's a really cool photo I want to show you guys, but whenever somebody sends me an actual photo of someone, I like to make sure that it's okay to show it. So there's a cool photo of someone dressing up as a god I want to show you, but I didn't actually get permission yet, so we're going to skip that one. So first we have, this is a comic from Liam. Let's see if I can make that bigger for you all. Didn't make it bigger. It's his retelling of the story of Marsyas and Apollo. Look at the creepy Apollo right there, holding the knife up. For those of you who don't know the story of Marsyas and Apollo, Marsyas is a satyr who rather foolishly got into a music contest with Apollo. Never do that. Never get into a contest with any gods. Because if somehow they don't win, they're going to kill you. Or turn you into a spider, perhaps. And if they do win, they're going to want their prize to be they pull your skin off, which is also pretty bad. Just avoid it in general. I'm loving when people doing these comics, doing their own takes on these stories. I definitely would recommend to those people, too. Post them on your Instagram if you can. Comics are best, this is a hard way to read a comic when I hold it up like this. CVQ Lama, who has been sending and stuff, I asked him to post his things on his own page so we could all check it out, so we could read them, because comics need to be read. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here today. So this is a pretty cool picture from Moira. Now, Moira, you remember, doesn't like to draw boys. There's a few people here who doesn't like to draw boys. But Moira did grace us with this picture of, look, there's Asclepios. He's a boy, but he's surrounded by his 5 daughters. Remember how we talked about how, Asclepios, much like his dad, Apollo, seems to surround himself with very talented and powerful women. And he has his daughters who are all helping. I don't know which daughter is which. It's kind of hard to tell, especially because I think I only ever drew, in my books, I only drew Hygeia and Panacea. I cut out Iaso and the rest. Is that? And we have a Helios. There's 2 boys in this picture, Moira. You're slipping. You're drawing all boys all over the place. I don't know what to say about it. Let's see what else we have here. Now this is super cool. Now Jamie, who has sent us in a bunch of pictures, she's done some cool pictures of Nyx, and she did Hecate. I think she maybe did. She did that really cool picture of Artemis. She sent in, so it's gonna be. Oh no, she wrote it backwards. Look how smart. Okay, from my eye, this is backwards. She reversed it, so when I hold it up, it's Penelope. Penelope, of course, is the wife of Odysseus, who we recently, maybe last Wednesday. But what's really cool about this, she's doing an aspect of the myth that I didn't even touch on. So you know how Penelope had a bunch of suitors, guys who were like, hey, your husband's been gone for 20 years, and we're gross pigs, and we want to marry you because you're the queen of Ithaca, and we're just going to hang around your house and eat all your food and be generally abusive and basically plot to murder your son? Yeah, they stink. And what she did as a way of kind of solving this problem, she's like, I would love to marry one of you totally awful people, but I need to finish a tapestry for my late husband first. And so all day long, the story goes, Penelope would weave this tapestry, extolling the virtues of her missing and presumed dead, but she had the faith he wasn't, husband, Odysseus. Then at night she would stay up and unravel her work. So basically, by my reckoning, she didn't sleep for 10 years, which seems pretty awful. But that's what we're seeing here in this story, which is super cool. And it was actually something I was like, afterwards, I was like, oh, I wish I'd said that one. But I didn't need to because, Jamie went and drew a picture of it. So thank you, Jamie. Let's see. Now, here is some stuff from Yehi. Here, okay, to explain this one, it's a comic, so they're always a little bit hard. Here is Apollo, and look, he's got his raven on his head, and he's like, "Hey, son, how you doing?" Look at his face. He looks so dumb. and the Asclepius are like, "Oh, hey, Dad, nice to meet you. By the way, I heard that you totally killed my mom before I was born." And then the last. There he's like, Apollo's being all sad. He's like, oh, and his sister's trying to make him feel better. Don't be this guy is what it says above him right there. And yeah, don't be that guy. Don't be the guy that kills the mother of your child before she's born, then pulls the child out of the fire, then gives him to a half horseman to raise. Everything about that's unacceptable. Just every single thing. Now here is another, remember how people have been this is the part, this is a little bit more, also by Yehi. Look up top, there's Python. You can see the eerie light of Mother Earth pouring out. And then this is the fleeing of Leto from, being chased by Python to the ends of the earth. And with images of her children that she's carrying with her at this point. This is such a cool comic. It's really great. And it's it's talking about prophecy. It's just such a cool idea. I'm gonna have to post that one so you can see it. And finally from Yehi, pretty neat black and white drawing, which I'm not sure that we've seen before from her. This is great. Look at this. We can see Hera. There's Athena, storms. There's look at Poseidon's hair sticking up in the air, probably from electricity. I love it. Such a great drawing. Yeah, you are getting better and better. Thank you so much. Let's see what else we got here. Sorry, my iPad's being a little glitchy today. And okay, so this is from Nora and Drake. Now Drake has been very interested in space, as we know. Here is, I think his mom said it was Hermes, but I think that might be Zeus. That's a Zeus in space. Hard to tell. Could be either one. Let me see what she says really quick. Sorry, guys. I know this is pretty disjointed. I was literally just eating a peanut butter jelly sandwich 2 seconds ago. And then we have another drawing of Asclepius. I like this Asclepius because he's got not just one snake on his staff. He's got another snake on his head. This is the moment. I mean, it's this is by Nora, by the way. Deceptively cheerful. Because, look, he's like, yay, I just brought, Hippolytus back to life. And there's Theseus like, yay, this is awesome. But look what's coming in the top. This is, a second before Zeus blows up Asclepius. And then, on the just to make it clear, on the ground, there's Persephone, there's Hades, there's the souls, the shades of the dead. And they're, angry because they're I'm tired of people leaving and going back to the world above. Well, you're about to get somebody new. Great drawing. Nora and Drake, you guys are both terrific. Thank you so much. Let's do a few more. Got a lot today, so I'm going slowly because my computer's being glitchy, so I might not be able to get through every single one of those, unfortunately. This is pretty cool. This is from Aidi, who is currently apparently on vacation in Yellowstone National Park, which I'm jealous. I'm in New York and I don't get to go anywhere. I have a little tiny balcony. That's it. That's my outside space, and except for when I walk around and stuff. And this is his version of King Midas. And so there's this kind of it's really interesting. So King Midas, you maybe don't know this story. King Midas got his powers from Dionysus. So we have this kind of ominous Dionysus. Maybe he's a cult statue. Maybe he's just in shadow. I'm not sure. And he's saying, King Midas, are you sure that is what you want? And Midas is like, yes, I want gold. And not to give too many spoilers, because actually, if you go to my website, the GeorgeO'ConnorBooks.com, yeah, couldn't remember my website. I kind of tell the story really, if you enter your name on my mailing list, you get sent an automatic free digital comic. I tell the story really shortly in there, and I'm telling the story in greater length in my Dionysus book. But let's just say, wishing for the touch to turn things to gold, bad move. King Midas really screws up with that one. So this is a great story, great illustration showing that. And kind of like, look how creepy King Midas looks. I love it. Definitely creepier than the way I drew him. And we're not going to close? Okay. Let's do maybe one more drawing because this is taking a long time. I apologize, everybody. Oh, so this is from... Wait. Okay, so this is the story I told about when Odysseus came and tried to recruit Achilles and how there was the hiding of Achilles. Achilles, if you remember that story, had been disguised as a woman. And it's a kind of sexist story, and I don't really like it because Odysseus, because he's so wise and wily and crafty, he puts out a bunch of jewelry and makeup and hairbrushes and stuff, and he puts out a spear, and he's like, only a boy will choose the spear. And so in this one, in the background, we have Achilles, and there's this woman who's grabbing, she goes, oh, a spear. And Odysseus is like, I thought Achilles was blonde. So I like this as a take. Yeah, because you know what? Why would only a boy like a spear? It's that's a very bad attitude. And here is another picture of Achilles. This is him running and crying to his mom, saying, Mom, Agamemnon stole my toy that was actually a person, which is yeah, that's pretty much... Remember, Achilles, the great hero, is sitting out the battle because he and Agamemnon are fighting over a slave. That's not a good behavior. That's terrible. So, and she's like, oh, come here, my baby. And then it actually says in caption, needs a spanking. And I agree. I mean, he needs more than a spanking. He needs to be shot in the heel with an arrow. And oh, wait, that happens. That actually happened. And then... this last one, this is a myth I haven't told yet. But it's about the birth of Dionysus. Dionysus, unique among the Olympians, has a mortal mother. Her name was Princess Semele. And she made a wish. She asked to see Zeus's true form. And when she sees his true form, you'll see this in my Dionysus book. Zeus's true form is he's not actually a big, tall, hunky guy with nice abs. He's actually like a ball of energy. He's like a sun. And if you're a human and you're anywhere near that, you're immediately you're disintegrated. So this is Semele bursting into flame. Baby Dionysus inside of her. It's a little bit... There's a lot of stuff there I haven't actually covered here. I'm going to have to do a Dionysus one soon. I just want to get a few more pages drawn first. So, sorry, there was some more stuff I wanted to show. There was some cool things. There was some stuff that was done on the beach. I didn't get to show you Megan's new pieces, but it's just my computer's being really weird today. I don't know why, and we're already getting super late. So, I'll make this up on Monday. I'll show people stuff, and in the meantime, if you have other things you want to send me, be they questions or mail, please send it to my email, georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. You can always catch my old episodes, my youtube.com/user, my blah. Guys, I'm just having one of those days. Actually, before we get into it, I want to talk about something really quick, too. So I don't mention a lot of my other stuff. This is basically just a Greek myth podcast. I don't know if you guys know this. I do other books, too. I do the Captain Awesome series. I do the Super Turbo series. And what's pretty exciting, on July 7th, I have a brand new book coming out. And yesterday, I got my first copies of it. Check this out. It's backwards. It says on Rig. Look how fat this book is. This is a book I drew. It was written by a man named Dan Newman. It's a book, it's not for kids, it's about politics. There's nothing in it that's inappropriate. It's a book about the political system in our country and how money gets into it. A lot of us have been unhappy with the way things are happening in the government, or even if you are on both sides, it doesn't matter. If you're on the right or the left, if you're red or blue, there's just the government doesn't work the way it should. And this is a book that's kind of a guide on how maybe we could do things to fix it. It's actually, just so you don't hate it so much, it's the reason why Dionysus is a little bit late, because I had to draw 200-something pages of stuff like this. But I'm really proud of it. It's coming out soon, and I'm going to be just making mentions of it, because I want this book to be in a lot of people's hands so that people can help make our country a better place. Our country being the United States, because I know people are watching this from other places too. So, I'm sweating already. Let's take a sip of water. Now let's get down to talking about what we... Ooh, that wasn't supposed to happen. I have to be careful. I put my water down. Let's get down to talking Let's get down to talking about the person we're here for, Helen. Like I said, often called Helen of Troy, but that's really just one period of her life. Also often called Helen of Sparta. I'm just going to call her Helen. I want her to be identified for herself. The name Helen, I looked it up, means a couple different things. Most people believe it means something like bright or shining, which makes sense. She is, after all, the most beautiful woman in the world. Her dad is Zeus, king of the gods, so she's a demigod. And we've talked about this a lot in other episodes. Let's try to remember which ones. Does she have powers? Is she immortal? It's hard. She definitely doesn't seem to be immortal, but we'll get to that. And her powers, I kind of came onto the thing, and I don't know if you guys agree with me. I feel like her powers are that she is so beautiful, which is kind of a weird power, but it's like she's like Aphrodite light. Aphrodite is like, first off, way more gorgeous. She's a goddess. She's perfect. But she has the ability to make people fall in love with anything they want. She's like, hey, you like this pen? You're in love with this pen. I'm like, oh, I love you, pen. I kiss the pen. It's weird. Like, no, that's not what that's not what Helen does. Helen herself was just this incredibly beautiful woman. Now, their mother, I'm speaking already like I've introduced her siblings. Helen's mother is Leda. A lot of people confuse her with Leto. Leto, who we saw actually in Yeah, He's Awesome comic, Leto is the mother of Apollo and Artemis. And she has those twins, right? Now, this is where it gets super confusing because Leda, who is a mortal princess, also has twins by Zeus. So I don't know what that's about. The names are very similar. It's like 1 or 2 letter difference, right? They sound Leda, Leto. And I feel like sometimes you see this in Greek mythology. Like the character of Perseus seems to be very similar to the character of Hermes. They both have the wings. They both, fly through the air. There's the close connections. And I feel like sometimes a certain figure, a really old figure, like say Hermes, sometimes for storytelling purposes gets split into 2 beings. And then there's the part that's the god, and then the stories that didn't fit for the god story, like killing Medusa, they have Perseus. And I feel like maybe something like that happened with Leda and Leto, because it's very odd that Zeus has these 2 women in his life with very similar names who both give him twins. But there's some big differences. Let's get into them. Leda, very famously, Zeus seduced her as a swan. I've mentioned this on my Zeuss episode where we talk about all the weird things. He comes up to her, he's like, hey, look at me, I'm a duck. She's like, no, you're actually a swan. He's like, yeah, that's right, it's better. And like, that's how he seduces her. And then, this is weird, like 9 months later, she gives birth to an egg. Now, couple eggs, and sometimes the eggs don't happen right. Maybe the eggs are a little bit later, maybe because there's 2 sets of kids. He has 2 sets of twins by Leda. The first set of twins... Well, okay, let me give you some background, Leda. I'm sorry, this is getting very confusing. Like I said, she is a mortal princess. She is married to King Tyndareus, who is one of the kings of Sparta. And basically, she is with Zeus and Tyndareus in the same night. So when she gives birth to that first egg, which is like weird, you crack the egg open to make an omelet. You're like, oh, there's 2 babies in here. And one of the babies was Castor, and one of the babies was Polydeuces. Now, they are the Dioscuri, the sons of Zeus, right? And like we'll give them an episode one of these days. But they were very powerful. They were both Argonauts. But Polydeuces was immortal, and Castor was not. So the ancient Greeks often said Polydeuces, his dad was Zeus, and Castor, Tyndareus was. And with Helen's egg, because she's also born in an egg, there's something very similar. You crack open the Helen egg, and there's Helen, and there's Clytemnestra. And Helen is the daughter of Zeus. But Clytemnestra, maybe she's the daughter of Tyndareus. I don't know. There's a third version of her story, which is... I know this will be... some of you guys will be a really big fan of this, because it involves Nemesis. You know, Nemesis, goddess of revenge, who we talked about. Like, you can see her episode. See her episode on my YouTube. youtube.com/user George Olympians. In this version... Zeus and Nemesis are Helen's mom. I said that right. Yeah. And then Nemesis lays the egg, and she's like, wow, this is a weird egg. And then she gives it to, I guess, Leda. I don't know. It's very weird. Very weird story. Guys, there's going to be so many weird stories today. Like, you wouldn't think, like, it's just about this, like, super pretty lady. Oh, gosh, no. This is going to be one of the weirdest episodes we've ever done. And actually, before I get too far into this, I think we need to stop and draw Helen. Because I'll be honest, I went through my books. I maybe only have drawn Helen 5 times, 6 times. There's only a couple scenes where you really see her face clearly. You see her at the top of the walls of Troy looking down as Paris fights Menelaus. You see her as kind of like a hologram in Aphrodite's hand when she offers her up to Paris. You see her a few other times. Like, that's it. So I never really imagined this character. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit embarrassed by that. Something I really try to do in Olympians is to really give a spotlight, especially on female characters, give them a sense of agency. And with Helen, she's often used as a bit of a prop in her stories, and I never have given her really a shining moment. So I feel like that's definitely going to have to be a story when I come back and do more Greek myths. I'm going to have to do some more about Helen. But my slight use of Helen extends to the fact that I've barely designed her. So why don't we do like a kind of like what I did with Nemesis, where I designed her as I spoke. I'm going to try to draw Helen, who is the most beautiful human woman in the world. All right, now this is the pressure, because I could just draw like weird eyes right off the bat. So the bits I've established, so there's not a lot of physical descriptions of her other than that she's incredibly beautiful, which is like vague, and everybody has different standards of beauty. You know, everybody likes something different. Like Aphrodite definitely is my standard. Like, I drew her as the most beautiful woman I could come up with. I wanted Helen to look very different. So my Aphrodite has dark skin and hair. The little bit I've drawn of Helen, I drew her as a blonde with pale skin. Let's give her some eyebrows. So I've often heard that a symmetrical face is a sign of beauty. And it might be true, because if you look at my face, it is not symmetrical. I'm not beautiful. Look how much this one eye is here, this one's there. It's like all weird. So I'm going to try to give her a very symmetrical face. I don't even know what sort of mood to put her in, because as I will be talking about this, kind of her moods, her allegiances are all over the place. We're not really sure how Helen felt about this stuff. In fact, spoilers, if it even was Helen, I'll get to that later. So I'm just giving her this very conventionally beautiful, symmetrical face. Give her some ears. I like big ears, so she's got kind of big ears. There. Now, when I've drawn her, I've given her hair in a bun. Don't know why. It just seemed like something that a sort of queen who's maybe in hiding would do. It's a very easy hairdo to take care of. Kind of like a, if it was on the side, it'd be like a Princess Leia thing. I feel like something that I really should have done and was an opportunity that was missed. She is part swan, or at least part Zeus's swan. So I feel like she should have a very slender neck. And that also kind of like gives an excuse for maybe her skin being pale. If she has like, if your dad's a white bird, you're going to have maybe light colored skin. Maybe she has feathers. Maybe she has feathers. I don't know. So, there's Helen. It's not the most exciting design. I want to give her more attention at some point, but now we at least have a face to focus on. And as this face is known, it is the face that launched 1,000 ships. We'll get to that. Before she grew up, though, I'm excited to tell this part. Okay. I know I've mentioned this story before. I think it was on the Theseus episode. Super creep and general all-around bad person, Theseus, abducted her when she was like about 10 years old. So Theseus, who we all can agree is the worst hero and the worst person in Greek myth, and he's just awful, and he stinks, and he's awful. He has this friend, Theous, who is like also like just a jerk. Like, you ever know like maybe you have an uncle in your life who has like a brother who's like has a friend who's kind of like just bad, and like you put them together and they're so much worse. Like, that's like Theseus and Theous. And they're like, yeah, we should like get married. And they're like, yeah, how we do it? And Theseus, who's like the creepiest creep in the creepity creep, he's like, I've heard there's this woman, Helen, who when she grows up is going to be the most beautiful woman in the world. So I think we should go kidnap her and I'll lock her away until she's old enough and then I'll marry her. Which is like, You're kidnapping a child to eventually marry. You are the worst. Why do we call you a hero? You're the worst. And they do it. He goes and he takes her and locks her away. Then Theous is like, I want my wife to be Persephone. And Theseus, if he had half a brain in his head, should be like, she's already married to like the god of the dead, right? Like that's going to end badly. They go down to the underworld anyway. This is that story, which I know I've told a few times now, where Theous is like, Hades, we're here to take your wife. And Hades is like, why don't you sit and have a seat and we'll talk about this like, like distinguished gentlemen. And Theous and Theseus sit on this bench and Hades just gets up and leaves. And they're like, oh, we're stuck to this bench forever. And it's not until Hercules comes down sometime later and finds his, I guess, cousin, second cousin, Theseus, and he pulls him off the bench, but he pulls off his butt. Yeah. I enjoy the story because Theseus gets his butt pulled off. Theous, though, he's just stuck. He's still down there. He can't get up. He's just stuck there forever. And while, luckily, for the sake of Helen, while Theseus is stuck to a bench in the underworld, her brothers, the Dioscuri, Castor and Polydeuces, come. They're like, we're getting you out of here. This guy's a creep. And they do. Years pass, and then there's a bit of a competition to marry her because her reputation as the most beautiful in the world has preceded her. And this is interesting. I don't really know what to make of this. She ends up marrying Menelaus, who's another king of Sparta. I guess there were several kings because like her dad's a king of Sparta. It's like not her brother. I don't know how it works. But one of the reasons she marries him is because Clytemnestra, her egg sister, the one that wasn't the daughter of Zeus, married Agamemnon, the high king of the Greeks. And I'm like, why? Okay, I'm just like, maybe there was other things in here, but like, isn't it weird that like the one, like that Clytemnestra got married first? And like, why would the high king of the Greeks, who outranks Menelaus, not marry the daughter who was supposedly the most beautiful girl in the world? I mean, Clytemnestra must have had a better personality. I mean, look, I made her kind of a blank slate, maybe. I don't know, it's weird. So she marries Menelaus. And that could have been the end of her story. But go back and watch Monday's episode where I talk about the judgment of Paris. Basically, long story short, very long story, I made a whole episode of it. Paris is this secret prince of Troy who is chosen to mediate a dispute between Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite over who is the most beautiful goddess. Not really who's the most beautiful, we got to that part. And they basically all end up offering him something. Hera offers him, hey, have the continent of Asia. Athena offers him, I will make you the greatest warrior who ever lived. And Aphrodite's like, you like pretty ladies? I'll give you the prettiest woman in the world. And he chooses Aphrodite's. And the problem is, the most beautiful woman in the world is Helen. She's already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. And here's where we start getting some of those discrepancies, right? So, does Helen love Paris? Was Helen abducted by Paris? Depending on the versions, we're not really sure. And honestly, given that Aphrodite's involved, did Helen even have a choice if she does in fact love Paris? Because Aphrodite is the goddess of love. She could make you, like I said, fall in love with his pen. Like he could have, like what if Aphrodite, Aphrodite could have just said like, choose me and I'll make you fall in love with a pen. And he's like, I don't want to do it. And she makes him fall in love with a pen anyway. She was actually being honorable, I guess. So depending on the version of the myth, or the myths, there's various versions of this. Sometimes Paris goes to the games, the competition that I mentioned. And he actually just straight up wins her hand. She just loves him. That's kind of, I guess, in a way, the nicest one, except for not really, considering what happens later. In some versions, Aphrodite makes her fall in love with him and they run off together. In some versions, she just falls in love with Paris anyway, because when we talked about Paris on Monday, he's actually, like, people remark, like, oh, he's very godlike. He's actually a very good-looking dude, and he's got a lot of stuff going for him. So whatever the reason is, she runs off with Paris. They go to Troy. We'll get back to this later, because some versions, she doesn't even do that. I know. There's so much. It's such a weird episode, guys. And Menelaus, who's like now, he's a king, and his queen has left him. He goes to his brother, Agamemnon, high king of the Greeks, and is like, we need to do something about this. And they go around and they recruit everybody, Diomedes, Odysseus, Achilles, Ajax, everybody. And that starts the Trojan War. And that's why she's called the face that launched 1,000 ships, because the reason given, at least mythically, for the Trojan War is they're trying to get back this one woman, the most beautiful woman in the world. And all those Greek kings and all those Greek soldiers, they all get together and they put all their efforts into helping Menelaus get his wife back. I'm like, oh no, Menelaus, maybe you just gotta give up, So she spends the Trojan War as the paramour, we'll say, of Paris. And again, depending on the version, sometimes she really seems to love him, and sometimes maybe she's got some regrets. There's actually some really nice scenes in the Iliad, which I mention like every day. In the Iliad, you get a little bit of a sense that maybe she's a little bit regretful. Not maybe, well, at least at first, not necessarily because she doesn't love Paris, but I think she feels really bad about what's happening. We're several years, many years into a war being fought on her behalf, and she has some real regrets. And then when Achilles, on his day of wrath, when he kills Hector, there's a really beautiful scene. It's one of my favorite scenes where, she goes up and she's at his funeral and she eulogizes him. And it's just this simple little bit, and it gives you such insight into her character, where she's like, I really liked Hector. He was nice to me. And you realize, oh my gosh, think about this woman. She is a maybe captive princess of the Greeks. Maybe she's not, but this whole war, everyone in Troy is blaming her for this. Everyone in Troy has lost people. Their lives have been upended. There's been all this stuff happening because of her sake. Her life in Troy is probably hell. This is why I don't like to call her Helen of Troy, because her time in Troy, even if she had the love of Paris, was not a happy time. And out of everybody there, the only person, the most heroic character in the Iliad, who's nice to her, is Hector. Who, Hector loses his life in this thing, and he's, the one person who's kind to her, and then she loses even that. And there she kind of makes some comments comparing Paris as, you're not as good as your brother. Which, duh. We all know that. But it's a really charming scene, and it really gives you some insight into the character. It's one of the most humanizing things that I feel about her. It makes me feel the most for her. I feel really bad for her. When you realize that moment, you're like, oh, you're not just the princess. You are a pawn. You have been used. You've been manipulated, and everyone hates you for it. So eventually Paris dies. We did that in Monday's episode. I'm already going long, so I'm going to skip over some details. Then she's kind of passed off to the brother of Hector and Paris, this dude named Deiphobos. Deiphobos' name means fear of God, which is just hilarious. I don't know why. And she doesn't seem to be really happy with that. I think about this. Even if she loved Paris and she gave up everything else she had and she's this object of scorn, at least she had the love of this guy. And then he's killed. And then she's just his little brother takes her, and what? Again, she's being treated as property. It's appalling. And so there's a couple different accounts of what Helen does during the sack of Troy. The sack of Troy is when Odysseus comes with the idea of the Trojan horse. They come inside. The Greeks sneak inside this giant wooden horse, and then they sneak out at night and just murder everybody in Troy, except for Aeneas and a few other people who get away. Now, there's one version where I forget who does it. There's actually a version where she's on the Greek side, and she pretends that she is a worshiper of Dionysus and starts acting all crazy and stuff. And she's using a torch, woo, look at me, I'm going crazy. And she's actually using the torch to signal to the Greeks that it's safe to come outside. That now you can come outside and murder everybody, which shows she's on the Greek side. But then there's this other version, and this is from a play by Euripides, I'm pretty sure, where she somehow knows what's up, and she doesn't just come out, but it's weird because she doesn't come out and say, "Hey, this is full of Greeks who are going to kill us." She goes around, and she's senses. Maybe this is an example of her having powers. She could sense what's really inside this horse. And she starts imitating by name, by voices, all the queens and all the women and all the people loved ones that these Greek soldiers had left behind, and calls out their names. So she's like, hey Aeschylus, hey, Aeschylus. And they would hear these voices. And these guys who've been away for like 10 years are like, I have to go. And they're like, and like Odysseus is like, for God's sake, no. And he's like holding people. And Menelaus is helping too. And like, that's like weird, right? Like she kind of knows what's happening and she's torturing these guys. So here's another interesting thing. So whatever the reason is, the Greeks come out at nightfall, start massacring everybody. She's taken her husband her paramour Deiphobos' weapons and hid them. So when the Greeks come to his door, he's like, and he gets mutilated. Like, there's different versions of how he gets killed. In some versions, Helen straight up kills him herself. But the version that you see in the Aeneid, remember how Aeneas goes to the underworld and sees people that he's met on his journeys? When he sees Deiphobos in the underworld, this dude is still bearing the wounds he took in life. He's missing hands, he's missing feet, he's missing his nose, his ears. He was hacked to ribbons and was never even buried afterwards. And he's still like, he's like this horrible, like shambling zombie in the underworld. And he's like, please, Aeneas, take revenge on the Greeks. When he's saying through his face, which is missing. It's a creepy, creepy scene. So that's something that she does. And then, how does she get out of this mess? More than half the Greeks, almost all the Greeks hate her, almost all the Trojans hate her. The only person that seemed to like her was Hector, and he's dead, or Paris, and he's dead. She has no allies, and Menelaus sees her husband, her estranged husband, who she left for, who she humiliated him, and he's a kind of macho guy, which isn't a good thing, but this is the way they were back then. And he decides, I'm gonna kill you, and he pulls his sword out, and she just drops her robe, and he's like, oh, you're so pretty. That's really it. Yeah, that's her power, I guess. She's so good looking you can't bring yourself to hurt her. So he takes her back as his queen. And in the Aeneid, we actually see that. We actually see them together in that's in the Odyssey. In the Odyssey, I'm mixing up my epic poems, guys. In the Odyssey, you actually see them together, and she doesn't seem like she's happy. And who could blame her? Her life has been super difficult. Now, there's a lot of weird, so that's not super weird, right? There's a lot of different versions in there. I want to go into some of the alternate versions. And some of these, I'll be honest, these are old stories. These are like plays by somebody who's like super duper famous. Some of these seem like real fanfic trying to make this a happy ending, because it's not a very happy ending. So, let's see. What's the order I want to do this for? Okay, there's this one version, right? Written by Euripides. You all heard of Euripides, right? Do you fix these pants, Euripides? Oh, I messed that joke up. Euripides was a very famous playwright. And he wrote a play called Helen, all about Helen. And in this play, we learn Helen of Troy, all this stuff, it wasn't Helen. Yeah. When Aphrodite promised the most beautiful woman in the world to Paris, Hera makes a copy, sometimes called a ghost, sometimes called a wraith. The word translates differently. She takes her power. Hera controls air, right? She takes the clouds and makes this being, this duplicate, this copy of Helen, and sends her to Egypt. Sends the real Helen to Egypt to hide out. And the Helen who gets abducted and or runs off with Paris, who's in Troy, who all this stuff happens to, is just this weird wraith, this copy of her, this cloud person. And in Helen, we meet her. She is the real Helen, is in Egypt, and she meets Menelaus. And Menelaus is like, you're not Helen, I have the real Helen locked up on my boat. And she's like, no, that's a cloud, I'm the real Helen. And they kind of like are happily reunited. It's weird. Like, that's, all right, I grew up reading comics, and there's these things in comics called retcons, retroactive continuity, where like, that's funny. Last time I read the comic, that dude definitely died fighting Iron Man. And then you read like an issue, 6 issues later, it's like, oh, that wasn't actually me. That was a life model duplicate, or a version of me grabbed from time, or it was Mystique or something. There's always these things where they change effect. This is a total retcon, right? It's like, Hera made a cloud person? Why were they fighting then? If Hera knew this, and Zeus also knows it in this version too. It's very weird. So that's Euripides, right? He's not done with Helen. He writes another play called The Trojan Women. And The Trojan Women follows 4 different women of Troy. It's actually these women in the Iliad who you see who are kind of like lamenting like Hector. It's Like he chooses these 4 characters as his focal point. And in that one, it's mentioned that she's going to be executed when she gets back to Greece. And you're like, ooh. But we also know that actually isn't what happens, because once Menelaus sees her, she's like, look how pretty I am, and he gets saved. But this is by the same author. I should mention the Trojan women came first. He wrote that first. And before even that, he wrote something called Orestes. I'm not getting into Orestes, because that's like a whole other story. And maybe if I do a Clytemnestra episode or an Agamemnon episode, we'll deal with that. But in Orestes, we learn none of this stuff is true. That she never went to Egypt. She was never going to be executed or never went back to Sparta, any of that. Apollo just took her up to Mount Olympus, where she was made into a god. It's like, wait, what? Apollo did that? I can't even figure out like the logistics of that. Apollo's on the Trojan side. Is he going to be pro-Helen or anti-Helen? I can't tell. It's weird. And these are all from the same dude. Like Euripides, guy wrote a lot of plays, but like he definitely spent a big chunk of his career like working out different weird endings for Helen. But the weirdest of all, it's so weird, I'm not even really going to get into it too much, to say, except for this was something, I mentioned Pausanias a lot. He was a historical traveler. And what I love about Pausanias, he goes around and he describes all the places he visits. It's really great for the descriptions of stuff. But what's even more fascinating is he blows into some weird Greek town, and in that particular town, they had a really weird version of the myth. And it's like maybe reflected in a piece of art he sees in a temple or like a public sculpture or something. So he will record these weird myths. And in this one town he goes to, all of this is fake. And basically, it's kind of similar to the idea of like Helen being like a weird wraith, that like the real Helen goes off to Egypt. In this one, not only is Helen a weird wraith, the one that's in the Trojan War, so is Achilles. So Achilles doesn't die. And then Achilles and Helen are like happily ever after. It's like, wait, what? Have those two ever even met? It's so weird. I don't know. So... let me see. Let me look at my notes. Did I forget anything? I think I got most of this stuff. It's a weird one, right? And I know, I just keep going back to these epic poems. Even though I say they're so hard to do, I realized after talking about stuff, we really need to cover Helen. And Helen really is a character who I want to do more to like explore in like a future thing. I don't know which story I will tell, because she's so inextricably bound to the story of the Trojan War. It would be kind of interesting to do like maybe a book of just Theseus being a jerk and have her as the little girl being kidnapped, but I don't know. I do want to explore more of Helen because I feel for her. Like I said, that bit where she's like, Hector was nice to me. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's noteworthy because no one in your life is nice to you. You have been used and treated as a pawn in your life since you were born. And that's really sad. So, yeah, that's my little talk on Helen. So, let's open this up for questions. How are we doing here? So, does anybody have anything already? Wasn't there a myth about a cloud Hera in Olympus? There was, yes. So, the story of Ixion. Ixion, if you want to see him very briefly in my series, he is the figure who was bound to the churning wheel in Mount Olympus. So not Mount Olympus, in Tartarus. He's the first murderer. And so basically he was married and he didn't like his his father-in-law. So he shoved his father-in-law into a fire, which is like, wow. You couldn't just like, I don't know, slip him some poison. You had to do that. And so this is this new thing. And like Zeus is like, oh, that's messed up. Well, you better come up here and explain yourself. We're not sure how to deal with this sort of thing. And Zeus is like, what do you got to say for yourself? And I don't know what he says, but he's like, no, I guess he's like, you know what I say? I say your queen is really pretty hot. And Zeus is like, are you making eyes at my wife? He's like, no. And so they make a cloud Hera to see like what he does. And he's like, oh, can make me, and he like attacks her. And Zeus is like, well, of course now you're going to be tortured in the underworld for all time. And that's exactly what happens to Ixion. And you know what? I'm going to assume Hera made that cloud person too. So that's actually kind of a cool idea that Hera's got this ability that she uses periodically. She makes cloud people. Maybe we're all cloud people. I don't know. Let's see what else we got. Let's see. So Jonathan Crystal asks, is Odysseus' wife Penelope the same Penelope as Pan's mother? Normally, no. It's generally, most mythographers generally assume they are two different people. And it wouldn't match up time-wise why Odysseus is pretty late into the heroic age. I mean, he's literally at the end of the heroic age, and Pan is already a god that's been established for at least several hundred years at that point. That being said, because of the names being the same, there were some stories back in the old days where they were like, yeah, Penelope is the same woman. And, like, clearly she likes really crafty dudes. Like, she likes Odysseus, and then she also really likes Hermes, who's, like, king crafty. So, but no, I don't think they're the same person. I just think it's, like, they just have the same names. Let's see. Little Serial Draws writes, what if while she's in Egypt, she goes to those nymphs who teach Athena in Morocco and learns how to fight really well? Then she beats up Menelaus and lives happily ever after. It's funny you mention that, because there are some accounts. Remember, she doesn't even need to do this when she's in Egypt, right? She is a Spartan princess. The Spartans were famous for their martial skill. So there are actually accounts, because we hear quite a bit about her childhood. And in the myths, when King Creep Theseus comes to abduct her, in some of those stories, like, he finds her, she's like in the field of war, like not of war, like the field where the soldiers practice. And she's down there and she's fighting and wrestling and running and doing all the stuff the boys can. And I like that idea too, because it makes a lot of sense. Like, why, if you're the princess of Sparta, like, Spartan women could fight really well too. Like, they were like, that whole society was like, you know what we value? Fighting, and everything else after that. So she probably could kick some serious butt. Menelaus was also Spartan, so I don't know. But I mean, then again, Menelaus' dad isn't Zeus. I mean, I keep coming back to the idea. It is weird that she is, for the most part, not displayed as having special abilities beyond her great beauty, despite the fact that she is full one-half Big Daddy Olympian. Like, she's probably pretty strong. Like, I bet you, like, if she really thought about it, she could, like, backhand Menelaus over a mountain or something. Well, maybe not a mountain. Over a small hill. If Agamemnon is the High King of Mycenae, is he related to Perseus? Yeah, so Perseus is regarded as, he's kind of like, in a way, like, he's like a father of Greece, and a lot of kingdoms come from him, and, well, more specific from his children, but all come from him. So yeah, there has to be, I don't know the specifics, because there's quite a few generations, although maybe not as much as you expect, because these things get kind of fudged. But yeah, there would definitely be a little bit of blood of Perseus, and thereby some extension by some blood of Zeus in there. But I guess by the point it gets to Agamemnon, it's diluted enough that you don't normally see it mentioned. That's something I'll have to look up and, like, kind of trace the various like, family trees of the gods. But it just stands to reason he must, right? What if every love existing is Aphrodite's doing and not a choice? Wow, that's from Yehi. That's depressing. What if love is a lie? What if what if my love for Greek mythology is just something Aphrodite did? Oh man, that would make some sense, right? She's like, I guess we need somebody to do a book. Let's choose that guy. He looks weird. Like, I don't know, it's a pretty cool idea. Yehi, that sounds like a great idea for one of your stories. Would I draw Clytemnestra, her sister, to look like her? That is a great question, T. Mackey. And I have some drawings of her somewhere that I did. And if I recall, I actually weirdly made her a brunette. I don't know why. Because when I draw Castor and Polydeuces, I draw them identical. So it makes some sense, if I'm using that rule of the egg, that they would look very similar. But I think I wanted to make her have a distinctive appearance for her. I feel like I drew her as maybe looking a little bit older. But those designs, because they've never been published, I would say they're not 100%, they're not locked in, so I could change it. That's interesting. People sound off. Would you think that Clytemnestra would look like Helen, or would there be a difference? I don't know. That's a really interesting idea. So was it Zeus's plan all along to have Helen? That's a really good question. Because, as we know, Zeus engineered the Trojan War. Was he thinking this far ahead? I'm inclined to say no. Because I think the reason why Zeus engineered the Trojan War is because he's like, man, there are so many of my kids around here. So I think after he had this kid and about 11,000 others, he was like, I gotta clean up some house. So then it came that. So I don't think that was his plan. That would be really fascinating. I would almost want to say yes, because I like the idea that he's laying plans so far in advance, because he is the one god who could bend fate. But I can't find a good motive for it then. Unless, I mean, because then, why make more kids if your goal is to get rid of kids? I don't know. Like, you have plenty of good-looking kids. You didn't need to make, they're all good-looking except for poor Hephaestus, so. These questions going fast. What do you think might happen if Eris throws another apple for the mightiest god and Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades try to get the apple? Now that's interesting, because I think Poseidon would rise to the bait. I think Zeus would rise to the bait. I don't think Hades would. My whole take on Hades, one of his many epithets, one of his many titles is he's the patient one. Hades just has to sit back. He's like, all right, guys, there's a few of us who are immortal. The rest of everybody else is going to die eventually. So we're stuck with each other forever, first off. But my kingdom is I'm in charge of everyone who's dead. And eventually, everyone who's here, except for the few of us who are immortals, and everyone, all their kids will be born, all their grandkids, and their great-great-grandkids, and great-great-great-great-great-great. Everyone who will ever be born will eventually be my guest. And one day, there won't be anyone underneath the open sky for Zeus. Of course I'm the mightiest. I don't think Hades would care. I think he'd be like, ugh. Poseidon, who has always felt the need to measure himself up against Zeus, he might run for it. In fact, maybe even Zeus wouldn't care, because Zeus is too busy looking at somebody he thinks is cute. So it'd just be like, she throws the apple and Poseidon's like, mine, and grabs it and he's like, oh, and then eats it. Or Hermes would swoop in and take the apple. Now, that almost makes sense, too. Not that Hermes would imagine he's the most mightiest, but he is a little light-fingered. He is the god of thieves. He likes causing trouble. He might just take it and be like, apple, what apple? And everyone's like, wasn't there just a weird breeze? And, you were kind of standing an inch to the left before? He's like, nah, you're just silly. So I like that idea, too. What about Ares? I don't feel like Ares has enough ambition. I think Ares is really only concerned with killing. And I don't think he has the ambition to be the mightiest god. Apollo maybe would be somebody who would have some ambition in being the mightiest god, but even I think he knows. We know he knows his place. He wouldn't fight Poseidon. He knows he would get curb stomped. Let's see. Hermes was leaving apple core. I like they would eat it. I'm sorry I wasn't able to show Megan's comic, because it was a really funny comic about someone eating the golden apple. I'll show it on Monday. Does Apollo dance? Yes, he does. I know this because there are several vase paintings where you see Apollo and he's dancing, and he's got a whole bunch of the muses dancing with him. Does he dance well? I hope so. How we find out? We have to see. Does Apollo have a kid who is the goddess or god of dance? Because they'll be better at him then, because that's his thing. He has kids that are better at him and stuff. Poor Apollo. This is it. When wily Odysseus sneaks into Troy in disguise, why do you think it's Helen that recognizes him? That's a good question. I don't know if that speaks to the idea that Helen knows what's going on, that Helen is a conspirator, or it might just speak to the fact that Helen is herself a lot more, like I was saying, we're not really sure where Helen's allegiances lie. She's a lot more crafty than maybe people think. She might be doing something that Zeus does, her dad, where Zeus kind of lets people underestimate his intelligence. And I feel like, as I talk more about this, I feel like that's what she's been doing this whole time. She is a pawn of forces greater than her. She knows she is being used by the gods and goddesses, and she's just a mortal or a demigod, but whatever. She's not on their level. So she kind of has to deal with it the best she can. But yeah, maybe it's game recognizes game. She's like, oh, I see what you're doing. You're sneaky too. Or maybe she knew already. I'm not sure. That's a great question. I like people definitely seem to be of the opinion that Hermes would steal it and Poseidon would lose it. Somebody asks, what are some other gods? Ty Angel 458 asks, what are some other gods' epithets? Whew, boy, that would be I mean, that would be a weird episode if I just listed it. What I should do is I should try to make a point of listing epithets when I talk about different gods and goddesses, and I'll try doing that going forward, because almost every god or goddess has multiple titles, especially when you see them mentioned in epic poems or in plays, because they don't want to keep saying Hermes, Hermes, Hermes. They'll come up with different names where they'll like Argophantes, the killer of Argus. You see that a lot for Hermes. Sometimes you see Zeus being called Chronides, the son of Kronos. Hades has nothing but epithets. In fact, I've read Hades isn't even his real name. Hades means the unseen one. It's an epithet too. We don't know what his real name is anymore. Like, it was a secret, because you wouldn't want to say his name because it would draw his attention. And even though he's a pretty good guy, you don't want the god of death noticing you all the time. So, like, every name we call him, Pluto, Hades, Zeus Chthonius, all those names are names that are epithets. But that is a really cool. I would love to actually do, and I'll make sure that as I talk about people going forward, I'll try to have some more of those names in there. T-Mac agrees with my assessment of Helen and her recognition of Odysseus. Game knows game. Phoebus Apollo asks, why is Heracles, you say Hercules, but I'm correcting it, the only demigod that Hera hates so much? If Zeus had other demigod children, oh, he's not. She hates a lot of his kids. He gets some special attention because he is such a major heroic figure. Which brings it back to the fact he wouldn't be a major heroic figure if it weren't for Hera driving him to do these great deeds. It's kind of like an endless vicious Ouroboros or a circle where, like, he's the most notable and he's the greatest hero because you make him have to do it. You're literally talking through King Eurystheus to make him have to do his great deeds, his 10 and then later 12 labors and everything else he does. I mean, she definitely seems to have a problem with a lot of his kids. She doesn't seem to be a fan of Apollo and Artemis, and they're not even demigods. She makes Dionysus' life pretty rough at first. I mean, most of his children by other people, with the exception, I think Athena gets off pretty easy because Metis really is in the picture. And as I show in the Hermes book, Hermes is just kind of charming. So she's just like, oh, you're a cute little baby. I can't be mad at you. You're funny. You make Apollo mad. That made me happy. But there's a lot of stories of some of his other... But yeah, it is a good question. Why doesn't she, for instance, go after Helen the way she did go after Heracles? I don't know. And then there's also that weird thing, which I mentioned in my book, Hera. She literally breastfed him as a baby, Heracles. Like, do you hate him? Are you just more invested in him? Like, you saved his life and supercharged him. He wouldn't be as mighty if he hadn't been breastfed by Hera. Like, it's a very complicated relationship, and that was one of the big things I wrote about in that book, because I find it really fascinating. He does seem to get special attention. I almost said treatment, but attention from her. Yeah, Hera wasn't even very nice to Hephaestus. That's true. She wasn't particularly nice to Ares either. I don't think she likes her kids. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about those kids. It would be cool if Helen could change subtle things about her appearance, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, like Aphrodite. Not as much, but her dad does have shapeshifting powers. Little Serial, that's a great idea. What if her ability, she's kind of like a mirror? Not that they're reflecting, because I would look at her and be like, you're definitely, if it looked like me, I'm like, ugh, you're not the prettiest woman. You look like me. But, like, what if it is that? Like, if she does, like, subtly morph? Like, if you're someone who's like, I really like blue eyes, and her eyes look blue to you, but somebody else like, I really like brown eyes, and her eyes look brown. And maybe there's just, like, a weird glamour or charm about her that nobody ever mentions. Like, maybe that's why there's no descriptions, really, of what Helen looks like, other than she's the most beautiful. Because I like this idea. This is officially canon. I'm working, no cereal. If I ever do a story about Helen, and there is an opportunity for me to explore her powers, I'm going to do this, because that's a great idea. Like, that's her ability. Because it's weird, as a demigod, she doesn't have abilities. Except for the beauty thing. And her beauty is that whatever your personal idea of beauty is, you see her. Like, maybe, I don't know, I mean, you can take that, like if you like men, like, maybe you, like, look at her and she looks, like, very masculine. Or has, like, traditionally masculine features. I don't know, it's a very interesting idea. I like this. That's a great idea, though, Serial. I'll give you a shout out. Yeah, people seem to agree with that. Have I ever done the Hecatonchires video? I have not. I think the reason I've not done Hecatonchires videos is because I don't want to have to draw them, because they're hard. But I might. That's a good one to do. So I should actually, I just realized I have like only 45 seconds left. So let me say thank you so much, everybody, for coming in. If you have artwork to send, please send it to email at georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. If you want to check out other videos, go to my youtube.com/user/GeorgeOlympians. Please look for my book, Unrig, coming out soon, July 7th. Order it from your local independent bookstore. I would love it if you could do that, especially for day of, because then it goes towards my sales. And if it gets sales, it gets noticed, and then we might help change the world. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.